Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we start, just wanted to send some warm energy towards our colleagues who were in attendance at the White House Correspondents' Dinner last week, including frequent This News is So Gayers, Christopher Wiggins of The Advocate and Joe Reber-Kenny of The Washington Blade. No matter where your politics are and what you think went down on Saturday night, and there are some wild theories out there, it was a super intense night for our colleagues, and we are thinking of them. And we're going to get to this week's news because here's what we're covering on this week's all-new episode of This News is So Gay. A tale of two legislatures. How are two state legislative bodies only a few miles from each other having such vastly different outcomes when it comes to anti-LGBTQ legislation? We're going to find out. A slew of news stories at the intersection of LGBTQ identity and K-12 education. What is the latest there? And of course, queer joy. Where is our roundtable finding queer joy in the news right now? Joining us this week to answer those questions and so many more, rural LGBTQ beat reporter for the Buckeye Flame. I work there too, and a core member for Report for America, Ben Jodway. Ben, welcome back.
Thank you. So happy to have you drag me back in the studio, Ken.
I drove him here, folks. And joining us for the first time, formerly a reporter for Kentucky Public Radio and Louisville Public Radio, and just recently named the editorial manager for Queer Kentucky, our beloved sibling publication, Divya Karthikeyan. Divya, and I should say a fellow NYU Violet. Divya, welcome to This News is So Gay.
I am so happy to be here. What a great introduction.
We are so happy to have you. Our roundtable is now assembled, so let's dive in. Well, especially given the intro I just gave, what a wild time to be doing journalism, which I think is what we say every week anyway. So we have to start with, how are our journalists, our queer friends doing? Divya, how are you doing?
Alive.
Yay.
Might sound like a low bar, but a pretty high bar for me, considering all that's happening.
How about that new role for you, Divya?
It is overwhelming, but it is also extremely, extremely meaningful to me. And I am so lucky to meet such amazing writers and help them figure out how to kill their darlings.
Oh, I remember the first time Ben said that to me about a story, and I was sad for him. Ben, how are you holding up?
I am doing pretty okay. I think I've been thinking that things would be worse, but I'm like moving and stuff, and that is like stressful, but like a good stressful. And Pride season's coming up, so we're getting there. I'm getting ready to be gay again.
I love it. And if you are the editor of an LGBTQ newsroom and you've heard Ben's horrible stories about what's going on in that apartment, so many anti-LGBTQ wasps in that apartment, we are excited for your move, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's going to be good. All right. Well, let's dive into state LGBTQ legislation. Divya, Kentucky has concluded their 2026 legislative session there with a legislative body where 4 out of every 5 seats is held by a Republican. Nearly a dozen anti-LGBTQ bills were introduced. Spoiler alert, how many passed, Divya?
None. Ha!
How on earth is that possible?
Well, one, it was a budget year, and a lot of the focus was on economic development and taxes, and there were a lot of tax credit packages. And then we had the data centers, where there were, a lot of policies to regulate massive data centers because noise, environmental concerns, and also we don't want utility bills that are thousands of dollars. And we also had ICE up there, where we were having the real argument over local governments and police to cooperate, which has been in the news forever, but especially in Kentucky, that's something that's been coming up a lot. And housing policy. But I will say this was just, like a don't forget we're here watching this. Don't forget, we're still doing this. This is just spaghetti on the wall, you know? That's how it felt. But the amount of people who, didn't really bother to make it to committee, and there was just one bill that made it to committee. And usually there were people who testify, and we had an overwhelming amount of advocates and lobbyists who came in and really seized the moment. One that made to committee, that was the one thing that kind of progressed, which would allow medical practitioners, and like a broad number of them, to decline procedures that interfered with their, quote, moral conscience. And the person who testified, which was, fantastic testimony, Jax, who is a very well-known psychologist here, had talked about how, we're already dealing with a bunch of doctors, praying over a patient with a knife in their hand or a scalpel in their hand. You can't really say anything. So you have that power differential. So that was a one bill that kind of made it to committee. But again, it was drowned out by the budget year. But it was again like, we don't forget. Hello, we'll probably be back. So I think it was kind of we had the same thing. We had the drag bill, we had the bathroom bill. It was just resurrected from the dead over and over. But that is my understanding, and I will also credit Olivia Kraut, our wonderful political reporter, and she did a lot of kick-ass reporting, and so I owe it all to her, really.
We're going to give her a shout out in a second. We're going to hold on to that for 1 second. Ben, I originally wrote, how jealous are you? But you can speak for me as well. How jealous are we of a legislative session that is already over? I can't tell if that is my dream or in some ways my nightmare, because it's so whirlwind.
I'm pretty jealous because like before this podcast, I was like double checking some of our legislation stuff. And I'm like, was this past this session? I actually don't remember. And then we're going to go into like overdrive soon enough. And it's like, I can't keep everything straight. I don't know. I do know what's in committee because we do a great job of tracking it on our website. But like everything is just, years don't mean anything. They haven't since 2020, but like it just feels more so sometimes.
How would you describe to people where we are? So we're here in year 2 of a 2-year legislative session. How fares our anti-LGBTQ plus legislation here in Ohio?
Well, it's not looking great for a couple things. We have about 15, like ostensibly anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, and then a couple that could swing towards being anti-LGBTQ plus. But the only one that's almost like, I'd be surprised if this one does not pass, is the drag ban. That one has been advancing more and more. We'll see what happens. And there's a couple others that are hot on its tail, such as the parental alienation one. Children would be placed with anti-LGBTQ plus foster parents.
Yeah.
If it's passed. It would no longer be a disqualifying factor for those foster applications. And that one looks like it also seems a little hot on its heels, but I don't know if that one will make it. But if the drag ban doesn't, I'd be super surprised.
Yeah, they're pretty determined to pass that bill to protect parents who reject their trans children. That medical conscience bill, Divya, gosh, it's so bizarre to think about. That bill passed here in Ohio, and when it passed, the Human Rights Campaign at the time called it the most homophobic bill in the country. And my gosh, were those glory days when that was the most homophobic bill in the country. So yeah, that one could come back. Well, I do want to talk about education. Obviously, as I've said before, that is my field. I have only 2 more weeks to go as a tenured professor of education, and then we leave that life behind. But there were so many LGBTQ plus related education stories out there. Divya, I want to talk about that one bill that failed, one of the bills that failed, and it was an attempt to ban trans teachers from being teachers in Kentucky. Can you talk to us about that bill and how that all went down?
Very strange, and also broke some Senate rules here. there is this Republican member, Jay Williams. He actually introduced this floor amendment to an unrelated bill about teaching certifications, just teaching certifications. And that amendment would have prevented anyone in Kentucky from obtaining or renewing a teaching certificate if they had ever been, quote, treated for or diagnosed with a non-disabling disorder per the ADA. And in order to sort of effectively bar trans people from teaching, we have this 1987 version of the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which still classified, quote, transsexualism and transvestic fetishism as disorders. And he had very conveniently used DSM-3, which is not the latest. We have a DSM-5 now, even though gender dysphoria is still considered a mental health condition. But they're all still outdated. So this actually was a cherry picking of DSM-3, which is not the latest. DSM-5 is. But what was so interesting was he sent an email to, and this was in the Lexington Herald Leader, which is a major paper here, does some incredible politics journalism aside from other pieces of journalism. He said he filed it after learning about a fifth grade student in his district who was asked to no longer address a teacher by the Miss prefix, which, quote, confused the child. Williams said he spoke with the school district about the incident and they, quote, took the teacher aside. And now the kid's being homeschooled, and so he's very upset. That created such a major problem. But I'll talk about the Senate rules that were broken here.
Please.
So there are Senate rules that bar piggybacking. His proposal was first actually a Senate bill, but then he withdrew that bill when it didn't get committee assignment. And then he reintroduced it as an amendment on the same day. You can't do that. But it's called piggybacking. And so that actually broke Senate rules. But amendments also need to be voted on separately. That's basically what happened, and that was the ridiculous, in my words, story behind why he decided to file that.
That's fascinating.
Ben, by the way, Ben loves this stuff.
Yeah.
He loves when rules are violated. I do want to hit on, you mentioned Olivia Krauth before, who has done all of this incredible reporting. And in one piece, she penned these words. She wrote, quote, y'all, and I can't do her, y'all. I think that she probably does it much better than me. I am a gay Jew from New Jersey, but it's the word in there. So, quote, y'all, I am once again respectfully begging you to get your Kentucky politics news from reporters here in the Bluegrass State because I fear national and international news outlets have once again gotten things wrong, like really wrong, end quote. I felt those words so flippin' deeply. How do those words resonate with the work of Queer Kentucky? Why are those words so important?
Thank you for the y'all. I always appreciate her y'alls. And I think you said it right. You said it great.
It's a resume builder. Yeah.
But this is what I call parachuting. I'll bring a little bit of my previous life back here to explain. I was a reporter, but also a fixer and a translator for a lot of international organizations when I was a reporter in South India, and India is where I'm originally from. And there were always these kind of preconceived notions of how impoverished India is, or how, there is a specific kind of question or idea of the state or of the country that you come in, parachute, and try to put it within those words. And you're trying to move towards a sensationalism. And here, coming back here, state legislatures function very differently. And I wish that people would do a little bit of reading on the specific state like Texas is not the same as Kentucky. The dynamics are very different. But I think that's the problem that we seem to have, where people aren't engaging with the actual procedural part of how these things work and how they don't. And so there was a lot of noise around this. There were these huge, this is going to happen. It didn't even get a committee assignment, which is the first part of the legislative process. So it was not going to pass. This was going to die. But it was also going to scare a lot of people, parents of trans kids, other teachers, this was something that was going to have a significant impact if you reported on it inaccurately without engaging with the subject. At Queer Kentucky, we care about that. We can't get that in. It's a very high stakes because you don't want to end up scaring people with misinformation. And also, she broke this down really well. And this is going to sound so boring, but we have the consent calendar, which is just a ton of bills that just you go one after the other. And then when a bill on the consent calendar gets a floor amendment, it gets pulled from it and treated as just another bill. You don't just slip an amendment. So this is the thing with, I think, my gripe with national reporters. When you're not familiar with how procedures in a state legislature works, talk to your local public radio reporter or local reporter. Credit them, but talk to people before you start doing this. Pick up the phone and call someone. People are very accessible now. Reporters are so accessible.
You're telling me they should work with other journalists?
What?
Oh
my gosh.
Look, I'm going to take that a step further. This is also, and I'm just going to be extraordinarily crass with our listeners, this is why it is so critically important that you support these LGBTQ plus nonprofit newsrooms. The Buckeye Flame in Queer Kentucky, some would argue there's 3, some argue there's 4. We are 2 of 3 or 4, depending on who you ask, nonprofit LGBTQ plus newsrooms in the country, right here on this episode. And so when you support our work with a recurring donation, whether you become a bedfellow with Queer Kentucky or whether you become a firefly with the Buckeye Flame or both, which is wonderful, it really does enable reporting where we know what we're talking about. I think it was last week, and Ben sees me flip out sometimes in the newsroom. It was last week that someone came at me and said, you haven't covered that the Senate's hearing the drag bill on May 28th. And I wrote back and said, well, first of all, and this was a reporter, you can't see me doing air quotes, reporter. And I said, well, first of all, that's a Thursday, and they don't usually do hearings on Thursday. And also, where are you even seeing that? And he sent me a screenshot. He's like, here it is. Like, this is journalism. And I had to respond and said, yeah, there it is. That's from 2025. So we really need folks to please support these LGBTQ plus nonprofit newsrooms who are doing the work. And we also bring you stories that no one else is bringing you. And Ben, this is one of them. Tell us about that teacher whose school board forced him to remove his "Hate Has No Home Here" poster because it had LGBTQ plus flags on it.
This gets wild really quickly. Basically, a history teacher for nearly a decade had a poster in his classroom situated among other posters. Like there was like a Bengals, the thingy, you know, like the college like pin thingy.
Pennant, yeah.
Pennant, thank you. And it said, "Hey, has no home here." Then there was like hearts. I think there was the American flag on it. And then there was trans flag, pride flag, and then like anti-racial hate. I'm not sure how to describe it, but kind of Black Lives Matter flag. Allegedly, it was the board president who saw this poster, took a couple photos of it, and then told the superintendent, hey, get rid of this. The principal told the history teachers, like, yeah, they're a little mad at you. But independent reviews from both the principal and the superintendent were like, we don't think this is violating anything. And the school district, Little Miami, about a year or 2 ago, had a ordinance about flag and displays, which would only allow like the American flag and stuff to be displayed, which would essentially get rid of pride flags. Some school boards in Ohio have done this, but that didn't actually pass. It was voted down. So, but there was like a lower education bill about like not exposing children to certain topics in the classroom, such as like gender ideology and stuff. And so he said that was where the issue was. But the principal and the superintendent both did not agree. They said that this did not seem to be causing any sort of conversation in the classroom about trans stuff. The history teacher said that he was pointing to this as like an example of like when you talk about Nazi Germany or the Civil War. This is the flag. It's like, hey, we're going to talk about some big issues and people have opinions. But at the end of the day, you all respect each other. We don't, we're not going to tramp on anyone's, identities here. And that made its way to the school board after the superintendent would not remove it, in which they voted the majority to remove this poster. saying that it was just because of these conversations and not because of the flags, though during the meeting, multiple school board members said that it would have been fine if those flags were not on there.
Right.
So yes, it is because of the flags that they voted against it. They said so themselves. Then it was removed. The history teacher then sued Little Miami, the school district. And there's a little bit of a hubbub of he tried to stay anonymous, but the judge wouldn't allow it.
And then Ben Jodway gets, what is the phrase? Something in his craw. Something stuck in his craw. And
Well, you just told me to check their social medias of these two new elected officials, one of them named Dan Smith. And I checked his social media, his Facebook, and it seemed normal on the surface. And I found like weird like Crusader stuff, like Templar Crusader imagery. And I'm like, that's been co-opted by like white nationalists.
Yeah.
And like white supremacists. But he's like older. So I'm like, he could just be weird. But I started to look into his stuff more. And then I found his Threads account where he was posting on Threads anti-Semitic stuff and saying how much he loves Hitler and Hitler did nothing wrong. And then his Instagram. And this was not highlighted by as many people, but I thought this was really upsetting, was following some not only anti-Semitic stuff, one of them being like anti-Semitic cartoons, and we're talking like the profile photo was the anti-Semitic imagery you've seen online. You have seen this cartoon. I don't even have to describe it. You know what it is. You've seen it. It is that one. And he followed like a snuff film account of like real people getting murdered.
Whoa.
Alongside the Little Miami GSA Club account. So I asked him about this, and he didn't respond to me. And the next day, he resigned. So that was something.
look at that. I mean, rarely when you send out a request for comment is the response back, I resigned. So it was really, I have to tell you, because it was a week after you were last on This News is So Gay. So we didn't talk about this last time.
Yeah.
And I really did want to ask you, and I'm asking you now, what is that like for you? Because we don't, as journalists, always see this kind of result where rather than, because no one else covered this was you, rather than actually answer for this, because you told him the article was about to come out, he resigned instead and pretty much cited your coverage as being the reason that he resigned. How do you wrap your mind around that?
You know, I won't lie, it's like a little satisfying, but at the end of the day, I'm just looking at what's out there. It's so hard to describe. I'm just kind of doing the work. Like, this guy is, you know, for all intents and purposes, aside from being a card-carrying, you know, member, like, he is holding Nazi sympathies. And that's me still sugarcoating it a little bit. And, like, you know, this is a man in power who has control over what children are able to learn. And, like, I am someone who is a history major, and, like, I didn't study World War II specifically, but God knows I know a lot about it. It's just tough because I wish just this never happened. I wish I never did have to report on this. You know, it's like, yeah, satisfaction, I'm holding people accountable, but it makes me go, how many am I missing? How many are people missing? And that's the real question out there, is that he's not the only one. He's just the person who doesn't know to not use his first and middle name as his username and tie it to every one of his accounts. There's people who are a little smarter than that, who I don't know about, and other people don't.
A school board opening in Little Miami. You are listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame. Joining me this week, Ben Jodway from the Buckeye Flame and Divya Karthikeyan from Queer Kentucky. By the by, if you are not subscribed to This News is So Gay, what the heck are you waiting for? Subscribe to This News is So Gay right this very second on your favorite podcasting app so that new episodes automatically make their way to you. It is time, folks. It is time for Glitter Bomb. This is where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that they are seeing covered out there in the news. So let's set off a glitter bomb. Divya, your first queer joy story that you get to share with us. What story of queer joy have you seen out there that you want us to know about?
It's a little personal.
I'm excited.
I'm learning flamenco cante singing. I'm a vocalist and I have been vocalist for a long time. And flamenco is ridiculously hard to learn. It spans centuries, cultures, comes from the Roma people who were displaced and shunned by the Spanish elite. It's also very gendered. And now, as I've been learning it, women have this like very husky, gravelly voice, which was like only men could do it. And it's for the machos. But I've been reading a lot about artists who are queer and non-binary are trying to interpret flamenco in their own ways because you could not explore, for example, poems of pain and grief and same-sex love for a very long time. It used to be very gendered. And so that's changed a lot. And for me, I've also been trying to find my space in this art form myself. And so it feels really good to be able to not worry about sounding a certain way, like a sweet singer. And so I've been reading a lot about the queering of flamenco that's been happening recently, and that brought me a lot of joy.
We love that. Will Divya Karthikeyan be singing at Bourbon and Belonging?
Maybe, maybe not. We will see eventually.
I'm so excited. These NYU singers, we love every one of them. Ben Jodway, give us a story of queer joy.
This is a pretty simple one, but it's just, it's always so great. I just hear that Twist, the biggest queer club in Cleveland, probably.
We can say that, yeah, they're probably the biggest queer club in Cleveland, yeah.
They're doing their annual LGBTQ plus prom, which is always wonderful. I always love reading stories about queer people who could not go to the prom and be authentically themselves, even if they're older or some are even geared towards, high school age. And it's just sweet to know that stuff like that is still going and that space is still available.
I love that. Shout out to Mandy Filer, who I went to the prom with at Pascack Hills High School. It was not a love connection, but I adore you, Mandy Filer. And finally, poor Jim Parsons. It was a fun clip to watch. He was visibly torn up when he appeared on Watch What Happens Live on Bravo last week, and he was asked by Andy Cohen who he would save from drowning, Cher or Madonna. So I will take a slightly more positive spin on the question for both of our panelists this week. For this week's quick queer culture question, which LGBTQ plus musician from your own playlists are you leaping into the water to save? Divya, who are you saving?
I am saving Janelle Monáe,
Yes.
whose album I still cannot get over from last year. I think she has a new one out now, but I cannot get over The Age of Pleasure. I have been listening to it consistently for a year, and I would save her, though she would know how to swim because the whole album is really about water.
And I think she's swimming on the cover of that
Yes.
particular album. But get in there and take your time because I need a couple minutes to raid her closet because her clothes are just unbelievable. Ben Jodway, who are you saving?
This is going to be so specific, and if anyone else knows this is amazing. I'm going to save my actual piano teacher, who does Sugar Deer.
We love her.
A fantastic band, and they do amazing music, punching above their weight. And if they are drowning in a lake before they can ever make it big, you bet I'm jumping in and dragging them out because they need to make it big. The one everyone knows, Wise Blood, probably. I do Wise Blood.
Yes.
Tell us the name of the group one more time.
Sugar Deer, Deer.
And that is the piano teacher that I saw. Was I at your first ever piano recital?
You were, yes.
I'm just telling you, I am just such a proud father in this newsroom. Well, we certainly want to hear what you all are working on. Divya, what's coming up for you at Queer Kentucky?
So many stories. We have this pipeline of federal policy related stories, and we're also very excited to share that we're working on a project on various stories on Black queer men and surviving the system while Black and HIV positive in Kentucky. And we have been funded by the Counter Narrative Project Fund, and as part of that, we're also looking at why PrEP access looks different outside Kentucky cities, and also state policy, which has been changing a lot, and how that shapes HIV risk. And we're also doing a fun story on an artist's evolution of their work post-conversion therapy. So look out. It's a whole mix. Yeah.
So looking forward to that. I had the opportunity to be on a call a couple of weeks ago with both you and Missy Spears from Queer Kentucky, and hearing about what you all are doing for the Counter Narrative Project. I am so excited for that. Ben Jodway, this is the most fun part of the show for me, because if you say something I'm not expecting, we're going to have an awkward car ride home. What's coming up for you?
I'm going to be publishing a bunch of stories about prides popping up around Ohio. One is going to be a brand new rural one. Another one's been around for a little bit, but we're going to be basically checking in with them and see what they're doing alongside our Pride Guide coming up. And I mean, it's not like just me on the Pride Guide, but I did do the map.
You did do the map. I am doing the other 2/3 of it, but the map is a key component. That Pride Guide should be coming out in the next couple days, and right this second, it's about 135 different Pride celebrations that we will be featuring all across Ohio. So much more to come. But sadly, that's all the time that we have for this week's episode. I want to thank our roundtable, Ben Jodway. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.
And making a triumphant debut, Divya Karthikeyan. Divya, welcome to this landscape of nonprofit LGBTQ plus journalism. I am so truly excited to work with you more.
I'm so happy to be here, and me as well.
So much amazing stuff. Again, I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame. And if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend. Subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com. That's me, to let us know your thoughts, and rate and review us on your favorite podcasting app. This News is So Gay is a product of the Buckeye Flame, a nonprofit newsroom. Become a recurring donor today for as little as $12.50 a month. Recurring donors, they're called Fireflies, and that donation truly enables programming just like this from a scrappy queer newsroom just like ours. In the meantime, read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories from LGBTQ plus reporters, and please support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms. Until next week, friends.